Lane Kiffin will confuse Carson Beck on Saturday and get the needed win for Ole Miss. This is how.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. I'm Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member as well. Today, we're breaking down the keys for Ole Miss to pull off a monumental upset against the Georgia Bulldogs. Pete Golding's defense will need to throw everything it has to confuse Carson Beck. Beck has struggled with interceptions outside of the state of Georgia, and that could be the edge Ole Miss needs to shock the college football world and stay in that college football playoff conversation. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is. Don't forget to find a second listen on the network. Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC or Corey Burton at Locked On Vandy. They offer great perspectives on college football, the SEC, and yes, even Ole Miss. So check them out as well. You can start this season off with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So Georgia is the most talented college football team in the country. Whenever Georgia is there completely locked in and ready to go, it can be bad for whoever they're lining up against. We've seen that firsthand as Ole Miss fans, but Texas fans saw that this season as well. The problem is that happens about once a year for Georgia for them to completely tune in and lock into what's going on. And the rest of the time, they just use their superior talent and they barely get by teams one after the other, even though there's not many ways to beat this Georgia team as far as talent goes. Georgia has to help you out. That is the secret sauce with the Georgia football team over and over again. There's a reason that the only team they've lost to is Alabama, who has more 4- and 5-star players on their roster than Georgia. There's a reason for all of that. Now, saying all that, that doesn't mean Saturday's a lost cause. That doesn't mean Saturday is going to be impossible work for the Ole Miss Rebels, because there is a path to victory. There's a very real path to victory. And the main way to get there is probably through Carson Beck. And everybody's like, what? Through Carson Beck. But here are the keys that I have in this game. Pete Golding must figure out ways to make Carson Beck uncomfortable so he does not gain confidence. Carson Beck away from the state of Georgia has not been good this year. Ole Miss needs to make sure that continues. If Ole Miss can do that, they're going to be in good shape. The keys for this game are pretty simple. Number one, Pete Golding making Carson Beck uncomfortable and taking advantage of that. We'll talk about the different Carson Becks in the state of Georgia, out of the state of Georgia, and SEC only and against AP-ranked teams. We'll talk about that today as well. And Ole Miss has to have a run game to threaten the Georgia defense, but it doesn't have to have that explosive run game. Ole Miss just needs to be able to threaten to run the football, to get 3 and 4 yards periodically when they want to. If they can do that, it's going to open up a lot of stuff for Ole Miss down the field, because this is a Kirby Smart team, which does mean one of the weaknesses and things you have to do is vertical passing. I think Jackson Dart can handle that, but Ole Miss is going to have to figure out a way to move those other defenders to make it a little bit easier, because Georgia has, as we said, really good athletes. And long yardage to go versus this Georgia defense is suicide for your game plan. So you almost need to stay on such schedule. You need to be judicious with your shots downfield. 2nd and 10 and 3rd and 10 is not your friend against this defense. So you have to be pretty careful. Also, do not go for it at all. One time, one singular breath. If you delay it 1 second, I'm going to open up the flamethrower on this in minus territory. That is inside your own territory. Do not go for one, even if it's 4th and an inch. We saw in the Texas A&M versus South Carolina game how going for it in minus territory can be detrimental to your health. So do not do that. Avoid that trap. And these 3 things you should be in good shape about. So let's talk about Carson Beck. Carson Beck is a good quarterback. He is a legit quarterback. He's probably going to be drafted in the top 5, likely by my Saints, if we're going to be real. But Carson Beck is not having a good year. And everybody's like, well, if you look at his numbers, he's having a good year. Well, you're going to have to trust me on this, and I'm going to show you exactly what I mean. Carson Beck's overall stats. He's 190 for 290, 2,302 yards, 17 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. That's pretty good. Can't really complain about that. He has 3 games over 300 yards this season. A lot of stuff is going in his favor, but this does not tell the whole story of what Carson Beck is. But his total stats look really good. If you look at his SEC only stats, it starts to paint a little bit different of a picture, if you know what I mean. He's 149 for 232, 1,782 yards, 10 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. All of a sudden, he's upside down on interception to touchdown ratio, which is not a place that you want to be. And why, when people say that Georgia looks gettable, this is what they're talking about. This is what they're seeing. So be careful about that. But it gets a little bit worse because I'm going to show you his stats outside of the state of Georgia against Texas, Alabama, and Florida. And it's eye-opening. He's 90 of 155, a little over 1,000 yards with 5 touchdowns and 9 interceptions away from Sanford Stadium or Mercedes-Benz Stadium outside the state of Georgia. That's Texas, Alabama, and Florida, I do believe, is leading this charge. These numbers are not the most impressive thing in the world. And this shows that this Georgia team is gettable, especially with a defense that Ole Miss had that has currently 41 sacks on the season. That's number 1 in the country. Georgia's given up only 10 sacks on the season. So it's very hard to get Carson Beck off of his spot. It's going to be on Pete Golding and that defense to do that. Ole Miss is number 1 in tackles for loss with 94. And scoring defense, they're only giving up 13.2 points per game. Number 6 in the country. So you can see Ole Miss has everything in front of them. The biggest matchup in this football game is going to be Carson Beck versus Ole Miss's pass defense. And that's the front 7 getting pressure on him. And that is the back 7 covering the receivers downfield. There's no Ladd McConkey on this team. There is no Brock Bowers. 2 guys that are having really good years in their first year in the NFL. And Georgia, for whatever reason, it doesn't look like they've replaced them. Now, there's good players. Georgia has better players than most everybody in every game that they play. But if you take a little bit of a step down and a little bit of a step down here, all of a sudden you're going to become reachable. And also the running back situation has not been what we are accustomed to with Georgia. Now, we've all seen this where a running back comes in that we've never heard of against Georgia or whoever, maybe like Garrison Hurst coming into the game. All of a sudden he has this big breakout performance. We've all seen that. Okay. That's not going to surprise anybody. So it wouldn't surprise me if any of these running backs were able to go off a little bit for Georgia. But Georgia is not the best running offense in the world. Ole Miss actually averages a greater yards per play rushing the ball than Georgia does. Georgia has given up over 100 yards per game against the run. That's not very Georgia-like. Ole Miss has given up like 80, number 1 in the SEC right now. So it's all setting up. When you look at these stat lines of what is going on, Ole Miss is matched up against Carson Beck. That is going to be where the butter is made in this game. This is going to be where you figure out what happens. Not going to be Jackson Dart throwing the ball downfield or Ole Miss's offense going against that Georgia defense, though that is going to be a terrific matchup in this football game. It is going to be whether or not Ole Miss's front 4 can put pressure on Carson Beck, either through a blitz, stunt, game, however you want to do it, get pressure on Beck and dirty up that jersey. And the people on the back end of the defense can cover those receivers. Remember, in the Ole Miss Georgia game a year ago, Carson Beck didn't even have to wash his jersey at the end of that game. The only time he got grass stains anywhere on his uniform was when he was sliding, and he was only sliding when he had to. Now, I do expect Ole Miss to play a ton of two-man in this game. They're going to line up and they're going to play some man defense and they're going to put some pressure on the Georgia wide receivers. When you look at the statistics, the game splits this season, Florida, Beck threw for 309, 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Against Mississippi State, he threw for 459. That was in the state of Georgia, had 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Against Alabama, 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, throwing for 439. Against Texas, he only threw for 175 with 3 interceptions. When you look at what's going on with Carson Beck, he had really big games against like Tennessee Tech, where he had 5 touchdowns and no picks. He was two touchdowns and no picks against Clemson. Did not play particularly well against Kentucky or Alabama. Played all right against Auburn, but I mean, that's Auburn for whatever reason. So we'll see. Georgia looks gettable because of you. Looks like you can affect Carson Beck. Now, my situation, like I said, if Georgia comes out clicking on all cylinders, there's not a lot Ole Miss can do about it. But if there's a way to beat Ole Miss, this is likely the way. If Carson Beck has one of those games, which confidence-wise, he's only human, where he's thrown 3 picks in his last 3 games outside of the state of Georgia. The one before that was Kentucky, to where he had no touchdowns and no picks and didn't play particularly well either. He has not played well outside of the state of Georgia. And Ole Miss needs to take advantage of that. There's going to be 70,000 people in that stadium. They're going to be losing minds. And I'm expecting Travis Johnson 2003 LSU. That is what I'm expecting to see from Vaught-Hemingway Stadium that day. You know, as fans, we think we know what we're going to expect from the running back position, but this week things could just get weird. Surprising changes and unexpected plays might be on the way. Who knows? Don't miss out on the full breakout coming. Hey, Locked On Ole Miss fans, it's time to recognize the Roy Player of the Week. So far this season, we've pulled over $20,000 to support players on Roy. Micro deposits lead to massive change. With Roy's app, you can direct your support to the athletes you love, ensuring all funds go to that specific player you choose. Unlike collectives, you know exactly where your support is going, and you even receive exclusive content like personal videos and updates for the season. The best part, it's risk-free. If the athlete transfers away or doesn't deliver on the content, you get your money back. This week, I am supporting Jackson Dart, the AP National Player of the Week, the SEC Co-Player of the Week with Jordan Watkins. I just pitched in $100, and I'd love for you to join me. Even $10 a person makes a difference. Let's show Jackson Dart the love and keep him connected to Ole Miss. Remember, pay today, celebrate tomorrow. Your support sets your team up for success. Plus, don't miss out on Roy's exciting giveaway. Win 2 tickets to a game in November. Just download Roy, create an account, and enter referral code Locked On. That's 2 words, and you're entered. Already on Roy, any contribution to an athlete's campaign also gets you entered automatically. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited. Download Roy now and join the NIL game with no subscription and no fees. Be sure to check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Roy_return-on-you for more information. Roy, support the players, change the game. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place your live bets on the NFL all in one place. Ole Miss is currently a 2.5-point underdog versus the Georgia Bulldogs, a line that I kind of expect to move, but is stable right now. So I don't know, but that's kind of my hunch for this game. So when you get a hunch like that in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats of the live play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make your moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So this is the Georgia Bulldogs. This is Kirby Smart. I know that Glenn Schumann is calling the defense and all of that, but Kirby Smart and his defensive unit, he plays the way he plays. He's from the Nick Saban school. So what Ole Miss was able to do in 2015 and 2014 against Alabama, that is going to be relevant in this game. And I say that because I do think it will be relevant for Ole Miss to find a running game however they can in this football game. Not something that runs for 150, 190 yards and crazy. No. Just enough of a running game to where the defense has to respect it. If Ole Miss can do that, their passing game is going to be fine. It's going to prevent safeties from playing way back far and everything being in front of you and taking completely away the deep shots for what can happen. Ole Miss needs a running game. And with Henry Parrish, Lane Kiffin said that he is out. That injury looked pretty gnarly, if we're going to be honest about it, to Henry Parrish. So that was interesting. It was also very interesting as the running back that came in whenever that injury happened was Dominic Thomas. Now, I've heard people say that the reason he came in was because it was 28-10 in the first half and the game was over and they were already doing their backups. And I just don't know that. We have all expected Ulysses Bentley to get a lion's share of the carries for the last couple of weeks, if we're going to be honest. And he showed out against LSU. He is the only Ole Miss running back to run for 100 yards against an SEC team. So Bentley gets to own that, so whatever I say, I'm not taking that away from him. But it is at least interesting that in that situation, Dominic Thomas became a pretty steady influence on the backfield in that game. And he did a pretty good job. If we're going to be honest about it, he did a pretty good job. And people my age and older will remember Dalton Hilliard when he was at LSU and then he went to the New Orleans Saints. Dominic Thomas is built a little bit like Dalton Hilliard. And so when I see him run and he's falling forward and stuff like that, I can see how a running back like that would help Ole Miss. Rashad Amos, he could be in a position to help Ole Miss. He was injured against the Arkansas Razorbacks, so we just don't know. So we'll see exactly how it goes because it is important that Ole Miss maintains a little bit of a running game in this game. It can't always be 2nd and 10, 2nd and 9. You need some 2nd and 6s in there. You need some 2nd and 5s. And I do think that Dominic Thomas, he had 10 carries for 41 yards against Arkansas. For the season, Ulysses Bentley's got 37 carries, 185 yards, and a TD. Well, Dominic Thomas is sitting at 23 carries, 131 yards, and a touchdown as well. It's interesting. It's weird to think about what it could be. Like I said, Rashad Amos was injured and did not play against Arkansas, so we don't know where he stands on it. Ulysses Bentley managed to hardly play in this game. It became a Dominic Thomas game, somebody to pay attention to that way. And, like I said, it's going to be fine. And as fans, we all pay attention to everything that is said about this team and try to figure out what's going on. The thing about it is, with this team and personnel decisions, there's no way to figure out what's going on. There's not. You can see things written down, but you don't know if it's true or if it's just written down for other people's benefit. They play so many games, whether through injuries or whatever's going on. This staff plays so many games that you just don't know how it's going to be. So this is my take on this Georgia game. I think that outside-wise, Ulysses Bentley should have been the guy in this game. But Bentley is probably going to get a lion's share of carries over the course of this week because him and Dominic Thomas, they're kind of the dudes. Now, Thomas is durable enough. He's strong enough. He's 5'8", 210 pounds to where he could be difficult for people to tackle, and he's going to get up underneath just about everybody, and this guy always falls forward. So let him get lathered up. Let him see what's going on. Let him face a role in the game plan to where he can see exactly what's going on, and Charlie Weiss and Lane Kiffin can build the game plan for him, and let's see what he can do. And I want to see some outside stuff from Ulysses Bentley. I want to see some jet sweeps type stuff. I want to see the run game moved in different ways. It can't all just be zone runs. And the zone runs for Ole Miss, sometimes there's not a lot of movement. that happens. So it's just kind of block the person in front of you and everybody gets stood up instead of moving side to side like a zone run. Everybody is familiar with that happening. So we'll see exactly what it looks like in the future, but I would like to see a little bit more gap scheme, a little more powers, some old-timey football, especially with somebody like Dominic Thomas, just to see if they can get some movement on that Georgia defensive line and maybe steal some yardage, especially early in the game when all of the scouting that Georgia's done on Ole Miss has been about this one way of running the football. It'd be kind of nice if Ole Miss was able to run the ball in a different way just to kind of steal some yards. If Ole Miss is able to do that, they're going to be absolutely fine. Georgia's walking into a buzzsaw in this game. Now, that said, if Georgia plays their absolutely best, there's nothing that Ole Miss can do about it. But if Ole Miss goes in and plays their best and Georgia does not play their best, Ole Miss can win this game. And honestly, probably win this game by a couple of touchdowns, because I'm going to be real about something. That Arkansas game gave me all of the 2008 feels for a closeout to the season. All of them, every single one of them. It was like Jackson Dart was channeling Jevin Sneed in some of those passes. There's just some beautiful balls that were thrown in that game. And Jackson Dart is playing now without a visor on his helmet. This Arkansas game was the first game that he did without a visor, and all of the passes and everything looked on target again. He looked like himself. So we'll see what happens. We'll see how it goes. You know, when facing Georgia, keeping it simple is the key. The Bulldogs thrive on mistakes, and can Ole Miss avoid the traps and play smart? We'll break down the game plan that the Rebels will need to stay in control in this game. Hey, everyone. Let's talk about Z-Biotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink, the world's first genetically engineered probiotic designed by PhD scientists to tackle those rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into toxic byproducts in your gut, and it's actually this byproduct, not dehydration, that is to blame for how you feel the next day. Z-Biotics produces an enzyme to help break down that enzyme so you can wake up feeling great. I admit, I was skeptical at first, but I decided to give Z-Biotics a try right before I went out with my friends. I made my first drink, enjoyed it that evening, and the next day, no sluggishness, no headache. I felt ready to tackle my Saturday morning hike with zero hesitation. So here's how it works. Drink pre-alcohol as your first drink of the night. The Z-Biotics drink is going to take care of it. Drink responsibly. Remember to pace yourself, hydrate, and get a good night's sleep, and then enjoy tomorrow. Wake up refreshed and ready to take on the day. Want to try it for yourself? Go to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege and use the code LOCKEDONCollege at checkout to get $15 off your first order. And with their 100% money back guarantee, you've got nothing to lose. If you're unsatisfied, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember, that's zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for 15% off. Start feeling your best after a night out with Z-Biotics. Have you ever heard of the South's favorite pickle? I'm, of course, talking about Stewart's Cajun pickles. If you think you don't like pickles, it's probably because you haven't tried these yet. These pickles are so fresh and crunchy with just the right amount of Cajun kick to help keeping you coming back for more. And they're not just delicious, they're also handmade by a family-owned company on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, so every bite is packed with authentic Southern flavor. But Stewart's doesn't stop at just pickles. They've got the pickled green beans, okra, carrots, and asparagus too. They're perfect for spicing up your snack game. You can find these amazing products at Rouse's, Sullivan's, Corner Market in Hattiesburg, and even some Winn-Dixie's along the coast. Or if you prefer shopping online, head to thepickledstore.com. Make sure to give them a like and a follow on Facebook and Instagram as well. And then when you shop local and try these pickles, I guarantee you will not be disappointed. Stewart's Cajun Dill Pickles, the South's favorite pickle. All right, so this is a game against Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs, and it's interesting at least. And this is going to require Ole Miss to play smart. One of the keys in this game is going to be playing smart and playing winning football. And what I mean by that is avoid the traps. Avoid long yardage. 3rd and 10, 3rd and 15, that's a nightmare. Avoid the penalties of what can happen. Well, the offensive line, do not grab this game. It's just you have a quarterback that's a little bit mobile. Use him. Do not get the 10-yard penalty in this game, because if that happens, Georgia's defense will be able to hunt. Do not help them out. They are completely designed to have better players than you and make you help them out along the way. And whenever they do that, they can get the momentum going and score just enough to beat you. The same thing happened right there whenever Georgia beat Florida last week in Jacksonville. That's what happened. So play smart. Stay on schedule. You need some 2nds and 6, some 3rds and 2. If that happens, you're probably going to be in good shape. Avoid turnovers against Georgia. The secondary is more prone to giving up explosive plays than past Georgia secondaries have. But Georgia's defense is still all top 100 players. It is still a extremely talented group of guys. And the biggest trap against this team is going for it on 4th and 1, because you think about it, that you should make it. You think about the fact that this should work out. You think about that, hey, if I just keep this drive going, I can keep the pressure on them. And that is half of their mindset. That is half of the way they beat you. Because 4th and 1 against the Georgia Bulldogs, and I said it a year ago and I'll say it this year, is a trap. Now, against Arkansas on the 1-yard line, I do not like going forward on the road at all, ever. Especially with the defense like Ole Miss has, I'm all about taking the points more than anything else. At home, a little bit different. It's more of a don't go for it in minus territory. Don't do what Mike Elko did at South Carolina, to where you injected all of the juice into that arena, and all of a sudden you found yourself in not just a dogfight, but a beatdown. That can happen in games like this because of the amount of talent that is on the field against the Georgia Bulldogs. Stay on schedule. Figure out a way to get yards on 1st and 2nd down. Get first downs. Georgia only gives up like 16 first downs per game. Get first downs where you can. Stay on the field as much as possible. And when you have the opportunity, and the opportunity is going to present itself, that's when Trey Harris, who I'm assuming is going to play in this game, or Jordan Watkins, or whoever is playing at wide receiver, they can make their presence known. It will be important, though, if Trey Harris comes back, that the offensive game plan, Trey Harris is incorporated in it, as opposed to the game plan being incorporated on Trey Harris. The game plan the last 2 weeks were just about perfect. It's exactly what every Ole Miss fan wants to see. Ole Miss will need to do something similar to that against Georgia. You're not going to line up and run the football on Georgia. You're not going to play a perfectly clean game against Georgia. They're too good. You just need to avoid the terrible disaster plays that can get you in trouble. If you go back to all the way back to when Kirby Smart was at Alabama, how many games do you remember was 13-10? Alabama was ahead in the 3rd quarter, and there was a defensive return for a touchdown, or a pick six, or something happened that was a disaster play that basically just ended the game. You thought you had a chance, but the game just got ended at that point. Avoid those type plays in this game. And Ole Miss, they have all the chance in the world to upset the Georgia Bulldogs. And right now, I think Georgia's walking into a buzzsaw. I genuinely think they're walking into a buzzsaw. So we'll see how it goes as well. Thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves in offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the #1 Ole Miss podcast. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for making it your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On SEC podcast. Host Chris Gordy holds no punches, covering the best conference in college football. Find Locked On SEC on YouTube or wherever you listen to those podcasts. And also exciting news, you can now become a Locked On Ole Miss Insider, the best and easiest way to stay updated on all things Ole Miss sports. It is our texting program and sends you notifications on anything relevant without the hassle of message boards filled with trolls. Enjoy a 14-day free trial to experience the future of college sports. We're adding new perks as we grow, so do not miss out. The link is down in the description. And for those of you watching on YouTube, we're going to send you to Locked On College Sports right now. Hotty toddy, everyone.